In a Miami courtroom today, Sean "Diddy" Combs shocked the world as he covered his face in visible distress while horrific details of alleged torture and sexual slavery emerged during the trial. Jonathan Oddi, a key witness, bravely recounted the terrifying nightmare of being held captive at Diddy's so-called freak-off parties, sinister gatherings where victims were drugged, abused, and controlled under constant surveillance. The courtroom fell silent as Oddi described the chilling rituals, secret cameras, and the powerful celebrities implicated. For the first time, the music mogul's unbreakable public image showed cracks, exposing a dark underbelly of control and cruelty. This testimony marks a turning point in what could become one of the most explosive scandals in entertainment history. The courtroom unfolds, a shocking revelation. Each word spoken in the courtroom sliced through the carefully crafted, glamorous facade surrounding Sean "Diddy" Combs, the iconic music mogul who had long embodied the image of power, success, and unshakable influence. The atmosphere was thick with tension, every eye fixed on the witness stand where Mark Wahlberg's testimony hung heavy with implication. Diddy sat quietly, his face pale, hands covering his eyes as if shielding himself from the brutal spotlight of truth that relentlessly exposed him in the name of justice. The details Wahlberg revealed were not just accusations but haunting glimpses into a darker reality, a world hidden from the public, cloaked in secrecy and fear. Witnesses had repeatedly mentioned Diddy's tendency to cover his face during the most gruesome parts of testimony, as if the horrors laid bare were too much even for the man who wielded immense power. The courtroom held its breath, waiting for the damning truth that could dismantle not only a public image, but an empire built on influence, intimidation, and silence. What exactly did Wahlberg say? Jonathan Oddi, the accused slave who rocked the court. The Manhattan federal courtroom was suffocating with tension as Jonathan Oddi took the stand, a figure whose name was once dismissed as a delusion, a ghost from tabloid rumors and conspiracy theories. Now, he was the linchpin of a case that threatened to unravel decades of power and silence. Cassie Ventura's sworn affirmation that Oddi had been repeatedly hired to commit depraved acts gave his testimony unprecedented weight. Suddenly, the story of Jonathan Oddi was no longer a fringe claim. It was central to the trial. Once written off, Oddi's troubled past resurfaced. In 2018, he had caused chaos at former President Donald Trump's hotel in Florida, arrested after a shooting incident that led many to brand him unstable. Then, he made a shocking claim that he was Sean Combs's sex slave. At the time, his claim was widely ridiculed, dismissed as paranoia and delusion. But the tide had turned. After the federal raid on Diddy's home, the indictment for trafficking in adult services, and mounting evidence, all eyes returned to Oddi, now dressed in an orange prison jumpsuit. From stripper to key witness, Oddi's journey to court. Once dismissed as a mere stripper with a troubled past and dismissed as an eccentric outcast, Jonathan Oddi now stood as the pivotal figure in a courtroom that could bring down the towering empire of Sean "Diddy" Combs. The atmosphere in the packed courtroom thickened, as if the very air held its breath. Judge Aaron Subramanian, a stern man known for his unwavering pursuit of justice, fixed his gaze on Oddi, then slowly shifted it to Combs, whose icy expression betrayed none of the storm inside. "The court demands honesty, not sensationalism," Judge Subramanian declared in a tone that brooked no nonsense. "If any truth has been hidden until now, today is the day it must come to light. Mr. Oddi, please tell the whole truth." Diddy, once hailed as the indomitable bad boy king of hip-hop, sat rigid and unblinking. His lips pressed tightly together, his posture unyielding. Yet beneath the surface, a man once in command now appeared as if ensnared in invisible chains, trapped on a throne that felt more like a prison. The testimony begins. A life destroyed. Jonathan Oddi's voice initially trembled, but as he fixed his eyes on Sean Combs, it gathered strength and resolve. "I'm here to tell the truth," he said simply. "Sean Combs destroyed my life. He is a monster." He took a deep breath, preparing to relive a nightmare that had haunted him for years. The courtroom fell silent, waiting for him to unfold the story that had remained hidden beneath layers of celebrity gloss and public denial. It all began the night at the Trump International Hotel in 2018. Oddi recounted, his voice cracking. "I fired a gun, but not because I wanted to. I was manipulated, controlled." His hands trembled slightly as he struggled to explain what seemed almost unreal. "He used some kind of technology. I don't fully understand it. But I heard his voice inside my head, commanding me to do terrible things to cover up his crimes." A ripple of murmurs spread among the spectators. Some shook their heads in disbelief, whispering about conspiracy theories. The judge quickly called for order. Behind the velvet curtain, the ritualistic parties. Oddi's testimony transported the courtroom into the dark underbelly of a glamorous world, behind the velvet ropes and flashing cameras. He described the infamous Bel Air mansion, a place whispered about in the industry, but never openly discussed. Pink lights flickering like fireflies, deep house music pulsing endlessly down maze-like hallways, Oddi described, his voice low but vivid. Models moved like ghosts, barely clothed, their eyes empty. Drugs were handed out like mints, cocaine, ketamine, powerful stimulants. It wasn't a party. It was a ritual. He paused, swallowing hard as he recalled the moment his fate was sealed. "That night, I was chosen." Combs didn't speak. He just nodded, like a king confirming a sentence. "I was forced to perform adult acts in front of a room full of men, more than 10 of them." Cassie Ventura stood there, laughing. "I thought she was a victim, but now I know she was part of it too." Oddi's chest heaved as he fought back tears. "I was filmed, threatened with death if I ever spoke. Every time I refused, a reminder. Money from shell companies landed in my bank account, a sinister way of saying, 'You belong to me.'" A defiant objection and the court's reaction. The courtroom crackled with tension as Brian Steele's, Sean "Diddy" Combs' lead defense attorney, sprang to his feet, eyes blazing with fury. His voice cut sharply through the silence. "Your Honor, this man, Jonathan Oddi, is mentally unstable. His history of delusions, erratic behavior, and criminal record renders his testimony unreliable and untrustworthy. This is nothing but a desperate ploy to defame my client." Judge Aaron Subramanian raised a steady hand, silencing the courtroom instantly. His tone was calm, authoritative, yet heavy with gravity. "There is no evidence before this court that Mr. Oddi is fabricating his testimony. If what he says is true, the allegations are profoundly disturbing and must be taken seriously." His eyes locked on Oddi, a silent invitation to continue. Oddi swallowed, his eyes darting across the room. For a moment, they searched for something beyond the jury, a flicker of belief, a trace of validation from those who could make a difference. Then he spoke, voice low but resolute. "I woke up one morning naked, my hands tied behind my back. I was disoriented, terrified. Sean Combs was watching me, watching through his phone camera. He smiled quietly and whispered, 'You belong to me now, Jonathan.'" The breaking point, a voice of lost hope. Oddi's voice cracked as he described the darkest hours of his torment. There was a moment I almost gave up. I wrote a suicide note. I was drowning in shame, pain, and hopelessness. He looked down, trembling, but forced himself to meet the court's gaze again. But then I thought of others. Other victims trapped in the same nightmare. If I stayed silent, Diddy would keep using his music, money, and power to humiliate and silence everyone he controls. His confession landed like a hammer blow, raw and wrenching. A man stripped of dignity and hope, yet unbroken in spirit. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, the tension shattered as Sean Combs sprang to his feet, voice low and furious. "This is ridiculous. I don't even know this guy. He's crazy, Your Honor." His lawyer swiftly yanked him back into his seat. Judge Subramanian slammed the gavel down, the sharp sound echoing like thunder. "Mr. Combs, sit down. No outbursts will be tolerated." Turning back to Oddi, the judge's voice softened with a hint of skepticism but firm demand for facts. "Do you have documents, witnesses, or anything tangible to support your claims?" Oddi hesitated, eyes desperate and haunted. Defense's dismissal and judge's stern warning. The defense lawyer sneered, a cold smile curling his lips. "Your Honor, this is a fanciful story spun by a convicted violent felon with documented mental instability. There is no proof he has ever met Mr. Combs, no credible witnesses, no supporting documents. This is a desperate attempt to escape accountability." Judge Subramanian's piercing gaze swept across the room, silencing all murmurs. "If even a fraction of these allegations are true," he said slowly, weighing each word, "this may become the most catastrophic criminal case in American entertainment history." He tapped the gavel. "The court will recess for 30 minutes to review additional evidence presented by the prosecution." Diddy remained motionless, eyes staring blankly ahead. The weight of Oddi's words seemed to crush the aura of invincibility he once wielded. The courtroom emptied slowly, leaving behind a cold silence. A silence filled with the echoes of a testimony that threatened to tear apart the velvet curtain shielding the powerful. The freak-off party. Revelations after lunch. After the recess, the courtroom returned to tense anticipation. Reporters, pens poised and recorders blinking, braced for what was next. Oddi re-entered with a haunted look, his voice quieter but no less powerful. "These weren't parties," he said. "They were sick, ritualistic gatherings where Sean Combs controlled everything, every moment, every person." He described in chilling detail the infamous freak-off parties. Dozens of attendees, young women, men, celebrities, and influential figures, all trapped in a sinister web. Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey, Leonardo DiCaprio, powerful people who came to watch and partake in the horrors, he whispered. Oddi revealed the methodical cruelty. Victims were drugged with a cocktail of substances, including baby oil mixed with a mysterious resin that had to be applied every 5 hours to amplify sensation and compliance. I counted at least 20 people forced into degrading and intimate acts to serve Sean and his guests. The dark underbelly, a system of abuse. Behind the glamour, behind the shimmering facade of fame, fortune, and the pulsating energy of the entertainment world, a far more sinister reality was quietly festering. It was a world meticulously engineered not just for pleasure, but for pain, control, and domination. One that shattered lives and rewrote the boundaries of human cruelty. As the federal trial unfolded, what was once dismissed as sordid celebrity gossip emerged as a deeply disturbing exposé of systematic abuse and psychological warfare, orchestrated by one of the most powerful figures in the music industry. At the center of this revelation was Jonathan Oddi, a man whose calm and measured testimony belied the horror he endured. Oye spoke of parties that were deliberately staged to facilitate the most perverse forms of entertainment. Debauched gatherings where coerced adult acts, the use of stimulants, and the systematic humiliation of victims were not anomalies, but central features. His voice cut through the courtroom like a blade, recounting chilling specifics that painted a bleak picture far beyond mere rumors. The horrifying details: blood, bodily fluids, and the mask of normalcy. Oye's narrative turned visceral as he described the environment within these infamous torture rooms. Special linens soaked in blood and other bodily fluids were deliberately employed, hidden away after the night's macabre rituals to erase evidence of the horrors inflicted. The scent, he explained, was always glazed over or masked with a special spray because he wanted the space to smell exactly as he wished, an eerie, artificial cleanliness overlaying the underlying filth. The courtroom fell into a heavy silence, as if collectively recoiling from the images conjured by these words. Victims, Oye revealed, were forced into nightmarish charades, bound by the unrelenting presence of urine-soaked sheets and other degrading paraphernalia. The brutality was clinical, orchestrated to break down not just bodies, but spirits. Some jurors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others looked away entirely, unable to bear the stark reality of Oye's testimony delivered with unnerving composure. This was not a spontaneous outbreak of depravity, but a calculated, repeated pattern of abuse. The prosecution seized on these moments, weaponizing the sheer horror as the trial's emotional and evidentiary linchpin. The echoes of trauma: fear, silence, and psychological scars. Outside the courtroom, the narrative extended further. Jonathan Oye's ex-wife bravely stepped forward, affirming the deep psychological scars left on him. She revealed that Oye continued to live in fear, haunted by memories and threats that had followed him long after the physical abuse ended. This testimony from someone intimately familiar with Oye's day-to-day reality fortified the prosecution's argument. It underscored that the abuse was not merely physical, but embedded in a long-term system of intimidation and control, designed to silence victims indefinitely. The echoes of fear reverberated not just in the courtroom, but throughout the broader community watching the trial. It was a stark reminder that for many victims, survival meant living with trauma that never truly healed. The defense's attempt to undermine, painting the witness as unstable. As Oye's testimony gathered weight, the defense launched a counterattack aimed at dismantling his credibility. The lead attorney, a sharply dressed man known for his aggressive style, brandished a thick file in front of the judge. "Your Honor," he began, his voice cold and calculated, "we are presented with allegations from a man with a history of instability, a man who once stormed the Trump National Doral Hotel, wielding a semi-automatic handgun, firing shots into the ceiling while shouting incoherent threats." Whispers rippled through the courtroom as the defense painted Oye as a mentally unstable individual, a man broken and unreliable. For a moment, Oye's head bowed under the weight of the accusation, but then, summoning strength from his ordeal, he looked directly at the jury. "Yes," he admitted, "I was a wreck. Insane, panicked, lost. But that is not evidence against me. It's a consequence of the hell Mr. Combs and his apparatus forced me into." He continued, voice steady and unwavering. "I survived that shooting incident. No one else was hurt. But have you ever stopped to ask why an ordinary person would snap like that?" The power of corroboration. Cassie Ventura and the pattern of abuse. Oye's testimony was no longer standing alone. It found a chilling echo in that of Cassie Ventura, a former lover of the defendant, and another victim who had publicly filed suit at the close of 2023. Though Oye and Cassie never met, their testimonies converged with terrifying consistency. Cassie described secret rooms where she was drugged, filmed, and threatened, places where hidden cameras lay in fireplaces and bodyguards lurked just beyond the doorways. Both recalled the same ominous phrase repeatedly whispered in the dark. "You belong to me." The phrase encapsulated a world where free will was a mere illusion, where obedience was demanded with brutal efficiency. Inside the machinery, testimony from Philip Pine's former assistant. The courtroom also heard from the former senior executive assistant to Philip Pine, a figure deeply embedded in the defendant's inner circle. From late 2019 to late 2021, Pine's assistant's accounts further corroborated the existence of a twisted culture, painting a picture of an environment rife with coercion, control, and exploitation. He described a night when Pine was allegedly forced to prove his loyalty by participating in adult acts at a secretive freak-off party. "Prove your loyalty to me, King," the phrase seared into his memory, revealed the sinister expectations imposed upon those within the inner sanctum. According to his statements, assistants were not only expected to sacrifice their time and energy, but also their bodies, caught in a dark web of abuse. He recounted the aftermath of multi-day debauched parties, where intoxicants and substances like ketamine, baby oil, and astroglide were used as ritualistic props, crafting an atmosphere reminiscent of dark ceremonies rather than mere indulgent festivities. From gossip to evidence, building a pattern of crime. What initially might have seemed peripheral or sensational now became central. These testimonies, once dismissed as anecdotal, fit together like pieces of a macabre puzzle. The jurors no longer saw Oye as a lone outlier, but as a harbinger of a systematic pattern, an orchestrated network of control, abuse, and silencing. The prosecution methodically revealed financial records linking shell companies and offshore accounts to the defendant's operations. Deleted server footage was painstakingly recovered, exposing hidden camera footage that documented the parties and abuses. Internal communications between managers and security personnel discussed meticulous weekend cleanup schedules to erase traces of the debauchery. This was no longer just a case of isolated misconduct. It was an intricate chain of criminality: recruitment, exploitation, coercion, documentation, threats, and finally, hush money payments to keep victims silent. The blueprint of control, torture rooms, and psychological experimentation. The courtroom was gripped by one of the trial's most disturbing revelations: the existence of torture rooms. Oye referred to these spaces by that very name, emphasizing their purpose was not pleasure, but punishment and control. He described rooms soundproofed to ensure that no cries for help could be heard, outfitted with blind spots in the surveillance cameras to allow for unseen horrors. Access was controlled by fingerprint locks, and environmental controls such as lighting and temperature were manipulated with the cold precision of a laboratory experiment, designed to break down the victim's senses and will. Oye recalled being locked in such a room, screaming, vomiting, and finally succumbing to a numbness so deep it erased his sense of self. Beyond the scandal, a system designed for power and silence. The prosecution emphasized that this was no mere adult scandal. This was the construction of a system designed to consolidate power by breaking down individuals, removing consent, and replacing it with fear and absolute obedience. Federal investigators traced the existence of similar rooms to other cities, Miami, New York, and even a mansion in Atlanta, which the defendant had since sold. Invoices for soundproofing materials and schedules for art testing sessions supported the existence of an elaborate network operating under a veneer of legitimacy. The system was cold, calculated, and chillingly deliberate. Oddi's final words to the jury echoed through the courtroom. "I used to think hell was an abstract place, but no, hell is real. Hell was that room."